If I was to ask you what's the first Wolfenstein you've ever played, some would come back to me with the basics with Wolfenstein 3D, some might even say Return to Castle Wolfenstein, and I'm betting the majority of you will actually say the more recent titles such as The New Order, Bad Blood or New Colossus. Or you could be a smart ass and claim, I've played Castle Wolfenstein from 1981. Now, none of these are actually a wrong answer, and I'm expecting the newer titles to be more fresh in your mind. These titles are just amazing in various different ways. Brilliant gunplay with compliments of superb level design, graphics, and overall, it was a brilliant revival of the kick-ass franchise. But if you dare say New Colossus is better than The New Order, I will hurt you. And I'm not joking. Something interesting here, out of all these games I've mentioned so far, none of them are actually my first Wolfenstein game. Funnily enough, the first ever Wolfenstein game I played was just called Wolfenstein. Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? So back in 2009, a game hit the shelves just called Wolfenstein, which probably confused a few people into thinking this was a kind of reboot, when it was intended to be a loosely based sequel based on the previous games in the main series. This game, however, wasn't purely developed by id Software themselves. Instead, it was developed by a company called Raven Software, with Activision being the main publisher. Raven Software before this had a fairly decent background to their name, with games like Star Wars, Jedi Knight cropping up, to them contributing development to the more recent Call of Duty games, going from Black Ops onwards. And once you get into the gameplay of this game, you'll see why they've taken that direction. A fun little bit of trivia for this game is that it actually sold really badly, with the first month only getting roughly about 100,000 copies in all platforms, and since then the game has been forgotten. It's nowhere near what I'd consider a rare game. You can get the PS3 and the Xbox 360 versions for fairly cheap. The PC version, however, is a little bit more interesting, and it goes for around £20. Now, originally this game was available via Steam, but at some point in 2014 the game was actually pulled from digital retailers, including PlayStation and Xbox. Normally I wouldn't really care about this, but I've done a little bit of digging and I can't get an exact answer. Some claim it was Bethesda due to the purchasing of its software's license and trying to clean the slate, or others claim it Activision trying to hide the game because it didn't sell that well, similar to the old 007 games. My honest opinion and theory to this is that due to the buyout and the game not being very popular, the two companies didn't see a monetary value trying to keep this game in some sort of distribution, and pretty much just said, well, there's no point, and just considered it scrapped at this point. Which is pretty unfortunate because I consider this to be quite a fun game. I wouldn't say there's anything groundbreaking when it comes to compare to the other titles in this franchise, but for what they're trying to do with this game, it works. Although it does feel like it has a bit of an identity crisis at times, going back from Wolfenstein to Doom to Call of Duty, but again, you'll notice this while this is being addressed over time. So starting off with the main story of the game, you're presented with a cutscene of BJ Blazkowicz infiltrating a Nazi warship. However, being surrounded by the enemy, you'll soon discover that BJ had an amulet in his jacket from the officer that he killed, and it contains supernatural powers. These powers you see right now, while not similar, will end up becoming a main focus of the game. After BJ escapes after foiling the Nazis' plan, he is then reassigned to the town of Eisenstadt, a name I've probably just butchered, so I'm just going to call it the town from now on. With the work of the resistance, you're basically there to try and stop whatever the Germans are scheming. Once you arrive in town though, on the train, you'll find that the resistance know that the Nazis are coming to capture you, so you pretty much crawl through some sewers and then meet up with other members of the resistance and fight your way out. And from here you pretty much get a feel for the two weapons you're mainly going to be using in this game, being an MP40 and a Kar 98. Don't worry, you will get more weapons down the line with stuff like a Panzer, an MKB-42 and some plasma weapons, but for the majority of the game these are the two weapons that you'll be going with, and I'm fine with that personally, as these weapons actually feel really solid, which is something not a lot of games do right these days, and having these from the get-go you kind of get a really satisfying experience when you're fighting off the Nazis, especially with the Nagant, because when you get a headshot it is just some of the most satisfying moments ever. So while you're having a pleasant time shooting the heads off some Jerrys, you'll soon learn about what they're trying to move in this station, and after blowing up a train storage container which temporarily breaks gravity, you just notice these machines are scattered around the train station for no odd reason. What I find interesting about this though is that while you're floating around and just shooting everything you can see, everybody else seems to be doing the more logical thing and trying to get on the floor and screaming, and they forget that you're in the area. But this is the first level, so I'll let that slide. So once you've fought your way through the station, you head outside, and from here you're presented with the open world aspect of this game. However, when I say it's open world, it's basically a couple of streets with the odd loading screen in the middle. The best I could compare this to would be the hub world from Halo 3 ODST. The game attempts to make you believe that you're allowed to free roam, but it politely nudges you in a semi-linear pathing to go from point A to point B. Now, there's nothing wrong with this, but I feel like the more linear level structure in games like The New Order complements the style of game that Wolfenstein is. I want to run down a narrow corridor and gun down anyone in my way, not stop and think, shit, have I been here before? Or have I taken a wrong turning? but after a while of playing it, you kind of get used to it anyway. So the first thing you're told about before heading to the Resistance is that there's a hideout where you can refill your ammo and upgrade weapons over at the black market, which is somewhere you'll end up going in various places throughout the game. Unlike the more recent titles in the series, this game allows you to purchase specific upgrades for your weapons using cash you found from finding collectibles around the map. These collectibles, however, are split into 3 categories: loot, which gets converted into cash, and these notes that I'm guessing expands the lore of the game, and then finally these tomes, which we'll come back to shortly. One interesting thing about this intel is that some of it can be read out and you kind of just stop what you're doing and listen to it, and it kind of brings up one of the weird parts of this game which I can't stop noticing. So the game's based in Germany, right?
In the next few days, a very important dignitary from Berlin will be arriving for an inspection tour. He is to be allowed full access to every base and experimental facility in the town. Should any harm befall this dignitary, all those charged with his protection will be tried, convicted, and summarily executed.
Okay, so if that's the case, then why doesn't anybody actually sound like they're from Germany? This is a common thing you'll see in games, but often when they do games which are set in other countries, instead of actually getting people from those countries to try and translate to English, which has more of an effect, they go with the cheaper option and just actually hire actors from their country to try and do a German accent. Sometimes this will work really well, however in Wolfenstein's scenario, it's pretty shit. Now going back to the loot, it's not really hard to find loot as it's placed all over the place, and a majority of the times the placements are actually pretty predictable, with them being in bags under a bed or a table or in a box or a locker. I don't really mind exploring the map for collectibles, but I think they've overdone it in some shorter missions, having 10 pieces of loot to find with some intel and then a tome on the side. But it means I can upgrade my weapons quicker, so I don't have to worry about it too much in the long run. So once you've been shopping and bought some little gifts, you basically head into the Resistance. And where the hell am I going? No, seriously, where do I go? I'd love to say this is the part where I praise how helpful the waypoint is on the compass with all the streets looking the same, but this icon doesn't work as you'd want it to. It tells me where to find the objective, but not how to get there. And other times it won't even work at all, because the game will basically glitch and the AI haven't caught up with you yet, so it's basically waiting for them to get to where you are. But again, it's an old game, so I'll let it slide and it might just be an issue with it running on Windows 10. So once you reach the Resistance, you learn about the Nazis investigating a dig site and they want you to go and check it out. So you go outside, fight down the street and head off to the dig site. And from here you learn about one of the main mechanics of this game. So you find a member of the cult from the Golden Dawn and he explains that they've been brought to the same part of Germany as you to investigate the dig site because the relics similar to what you found at the start of the game are being found from here. From here you discover that there's a second relic similar to the one you had before, however instead of handing this one over to the Golden Dawn, you basically keep a hold of it for the rest of the game and learn about the powers behind the relics. And this brings me on to the gimmick of this game. You have this amulet which will let you see into the veil, which without going into an explanation, because that would confuse even me, it basically lets you travel from one reality to another while being in the same position. But doing this will open up new areas which you can use to get around the map or find different secrets. But throughout the game you'll unlock more abilities such as slowing down time, increasing the damage from your weapons, and a shield that works more as a bubble. Thankfully these power-ups can be upgraded with those tomes I mentioned earlier, but there's something you should keep in mind when upgrading them. Before you find the last tome, refund every single veil power you've bought. I know it sounds stupid, but the last tome will actually upgrade everything. So it's kind of weird that you'd have the idea to, oh I can upgrade everything, just for the final tome to be, hey, you know that money you spent on upgrading these? Yeah, that was pointless. You might as well have just waited till the end. Now, I know a few people have an issue with this, but I don't really mind the whole veil idea, and it's a cool idea as a concept, but throughout the game it's randomly forced upon you, and making you have to use it kinda just makes it more annoying. I don't mind it at first when it's like, hey, this is a new power, this is how you use it, which is how you would expect it to be in a game. But when you get to points in the game where it's like, well, you could progress down this corridor, but we've put something in front of you so that you can't unless you use the veil, and I just have to question what the point of this was. It doesn't make the game any harder, it doesn't make it puzzling, and it doesn't make me think of what I need to do. It's just, oh hey, great, I've gotta use this again. It's a good idea, but it's a wasted potential, and I think that's one of the biggest problems with this game. It has a lot going for it, and there's a few things that it does right, but it just falls flat, and you'll see what I mean when I get to the bosses. But once you've done with playing around with your new powers at the dig site, you basically blow up the dig site as expected and then go back to the hub area. But instead of going straight back to the Resistance, you do get a choice of either helping them or the Golden Dawn, giving the game a bit more of a sense of an open world game, I guess. I mean, you have to do all the missions to progress in the main story anyway, and you do get a couple of side missions which add nothing. It's just, hey, there's a Resistance fighter over there. Oh goody, there's some people missing in a warehouse. Cool. I'll go do that then. Oh, Oh, it didn't add anything to the main game. I just got some loot. Cool. Right, moving on. So pretty much for the rest of the game, you go around doing resistant missions and Golden Dawn missions while walking back up and down the streets of the town and fighting some more Nazis. Throughout the game though, they just pile more and more on top of you in the first few areas to try and make it feel like, oh, you're making an impact on what's going on and the world is adapting to what you've done. But it just makes a gunfight last 5 more minutes, and yeah, it's not really that interesting. But if we continue with the story, you basically have to go to a barn where you find some people who went missing, and you learn from there that there's an underground laboratory under the barn. Which is surprising because, wow, this place is ginormous. And I've got to admit, for a game from 2009, this area holds up pretty well. I know, yes, I'm playing it on a PC version, but I haven't tweaked anything. I left the preset settings as they were, and the entire game actually looks really good. I played some other games from 2009 and they don't really stand out to this day, but Wolfenstein has such a weird theming and art style that it really complements the kind of game it is, and it works. And I'm kind of glad it does, because otherwise I'd be looking at something that's bland and boring for the rest of my time. I think one of the main things I love about this game, in like a way to praise it, would be the stuff like the scenery and the lighting. It really complements the atmosphere and it kind of keeps me interested in playing more, which is a good thing because the plot is really dull. I can't go and say you'll get immersed into the game like some people always want to, but you can stop for a few minutes to take in the view, which is something a lot of modern games lack these days. Yeah, they have all these amazing graphics and like, oh, it looks like real life, but the atmosphere just doesn't grab you. So once I'm done gawking at the view, you basically progress through the facility and get some high-tech weaponry, another relic power, and you unleash some monsters. These monsters, however, are from the Veil realm and they've been captured for testing, and they feel a tiny bit out of place. For what they are, they don't look bad, but they feel like something you'd find in Doom. But that is just a teaser for what's to come, as pretty much every single boss in this game is like that. Throughout the game you learn that they're trying to merge and harvest the power from the Veil to put onto normal soldiers, and in doing so starts to mutate the soldiers who have been under the experiments, making them stronger and sometimes more demonic. They actually do show you this with the first one you witness, when you head to the church later on in the game where you find some Germans setting up some equipment. While attempting to stop them, the equipment gets damaged and starts to break. In the process of this, one of the generals actually gets struck by a Veil energy strike and pretty much go from a normal human being to a demonic skeleton, which I'll admit looks pretty cool. And at first he seems like a major threat and the game is trying to play as if some sort of boss fight, which again would make sense. But a problem this game has is later on they just become standard enemies, which is a reoccurring theme with a couple of the bosses in this game. And it's not a trait that only Wolfenstein does, but I think it just ruins the effect of a boss in the game. These are meant to be milestones to say, yeah, you've gotten this far into the game, have a challenge. Not, hey, you've gotten this far, we're going to throw another enemy at you. But just so you can get used to him, you'll have a one-on-one with him first. But you know what, we'll come back to the bosses in a second. Your next mission from here is basically you have to go and investigate a hospital, and after wandering through endless corridors of the hospital you find the operating room, where a scientist is designing a portal to traverse back into the Veil, and after an officer gets scared he decides to push him in for some reason, and then this big guy just comes straight back out and kills him. Now this is what I would consider the first boss because this is a completely new enemy type, but the boss here is pretty crap. All you have to do is lead him around the 4 pillars to break them, and then from here the portal breaks and you watch the thing get dragged into a black hole and then leave. Yeah, not much else really happens from there. You'll see this type of enemy later on again, but as a normal enemy, but this time that's more to the end of the game. I think looking back at it, there's roughly only 3 bosses that weren't reused as a standard enemy type, and these were the last 3 bosses of the game. And yeah, that is the best way I could segue that there is nothing interesting in this story, so we might as well cut most of it out and go to the end of the game. So you're given an assignment to go and confront General Zeta, the leader of the German group who is assigned to the town you're in currently, and this is when you learn how far these experiments have gone, as General Fatty over here goes from being a fat man to a slug. Yeah, I'll leave that for you to decide how that works. But basically all you do with him is just shoot him a few times, let him go to a generator to try and heal, and then break the generator. And then after a while he just gets so fed up with you that he just gives up and then explodes. And the factory goes with it, and all you do from here is escape. And then you pretty much move on to the final part of the game. At this point you then discover that the Resistance and the Golden Dawn are having to relocate their camps, as I'm guessing the Germans are starting to zero in on their position, with them being right outside the door and, you know, them advertising where they are, so I'm surprised I haven't caught them earlier. But you get told you have to move on to downtown, which is a new area. And yeah, once you get to this area, you're pretty much at the end of the game. Oh, and don't worry about remembering the path this time round, you're probably going to go up and down it like 2 or 3 times. So once you find where the resistance camp is, you then discover that the leader of the resistance has been captured due to a traitor in the ranks, and you need to go save her. Once you reach the castle, you then have to fight your way through, which I won't lie is a pretty fun level. As for once, the layout doesn't look the same as other places. Once you get to the roof though, you learn that Strasser, otherwise known as Death's Head, has actually been put in charge to finish this operation. Now you might remember that name Death's Head, and that's because he's actually in the newer Wolfensteins, who is that really creepy scientist. And yeah, I will say the New Order did a better job of making him actually be terrifying compared to what he is in this. So pretty much once you've done that, you then go to confront him on the roof, and this bald guy brings out the resistance leader at gunpoint to try and stop you from interfering with the extractor. But then when they go to shoot you, she just saves your life and then dies. The equipment gets damaged by one shot from a Luger, and then a wormhole opens up and this giant worm just comes out of it, and I don't know what's going on. It shoots some webs, it breaks the machine, they run for it, you have to fight the worm. It's a better boss fight, you get to use some AA guns which are conveniently placed there at the time, and you do that for a couple of minutes, and then you think it's over because you go into the Vale and then get thrown out of the entrance of the castle just to walk down the bridge thinking, oh hey, I'm just going to go back to the resistance camp now to tell them the news. And then the weird slug thing comes back, and yeah, this is actually one of the worst boss designs ever, because all you're doing is just running up and down this bridge and you then have to shoot him god knows how much and wait for him to die. Yeah, I'd definitely say the first part was more interesting. So pretty much from here, you're then getting to the end of the game, and something that's worth noting with this is one of those point of no return endings, meaning if you've missed anything to this point, then too bad, you'll have to try it on the next run. And the final level pretty much sees you fighting your way onto the Zeppelin, which is carrying a machine that can pretty much kill everyone. You fight your way through it and head back into the Vale to confront Death's Head one last time, but before you can do anything, you're interrupted by the bald chap from earlier, who's now amped up with the powers that you have from the Vale, meaning this is an equal fight. And you know what? This boss is probably the best boss in the game, as he's actually challenging. He has more powerful variations of the powers you have with no cooldown, and throughout the multiple stages of the fight, you'll actually lose the same ability as him after you smash the crystal into his chest. And you'd think, oh, that'd make things easier, but for you it makes it harder to actually fight him because you're weaker and he's still technically stronger, making the satisfaction of beating this boss so much better. Overall, this boss should have been the standard for each boss in the game, focusing on each element as you get them through the game, just so you can get a better idea of how to use them, and then the final boss will smack you in the face of all 4. Funnily enough, similar to what Crash Wrath of Cortex did, but more serious. But I can't help but deny, it's such a shame because this final boss was actually getting me into the game for the first time since like booting it up. But I knew this was the end, and yeah, it pretty much was. Once you beat him, you just get a cutscene of you exiting the Vale and then escaping the exploding Zeppelin. And the game just kind of ends. It leaves you on a cliffhanger of the whereabouts of Death's Head, and that's it. You finish the game, you go back to the menu, and you unlock a cheats menu for the new game. And yeah, these cheats are pretty basic. They give you all the weapons and other little things, nothing really exciting, unless you think everybody having a pumpkin head is the bee's knees, which, yeah, I guess that's cool. The one good thing though is headshots are now 10 times better. So overall, Wolfenstein isn't a bad game. It's just lacking and dull in certain areas. It's got really good combat with responsive weapons, the atmosphere is spot on, but the story itself drags this game behind so much. It's confusing at points, it's generic, and it feels like it's trying to make Wolfenstein into a Call of Duty kind of game. I think one thing I want to point out as well with this, and it doesn't really make any differences, is the name of the game. So they decided to call it just Wolfenstein, which was already a strange choice as it wasn't the first in the franchise, but I'm going to take a note from a video from Accursed Farms here and agree that the real name of this game was meant to be Wolfenstein Black Sun, as while I haven't mentioned it myself, the NPCs in this game keep mentioning it over and over again, which is like, hey, surely that would be the name of the game. Obviously again, it wouldn't have helped sell this game any better, but I think it would have definitely helped make it stand out when you look back at the franchise. Thankfully though, while it was the end of the series for a few years, Bethesda got hold of the rights and then Wolfenstein was made with a comeback and is better than ever. And who knows, maybe someday we'll talk about those games. But on a final note, what I do know is this. While the story is very underwhelming, stabbing someone in the neck in this game never gets old. I might have a serious problem.